All right, folks, it is Tuesday, April 15th. Oh, took me off. All right, folks, it is Tuesday, April 15th, 2025, and a lot is going on in the world. We'll be talking about that here on World Edition and seeing what folks have to say about what is taking place in the world. In the Iran U.S. talks, Kamani says Iran U.S. talks going well, but may lead nowhere. And in Iran talks, a Trump envoy stresses their verification of nuclear program and omits demand for dismantlement. So, U.S. apparently is softening its position on Iranian uranium enrichment. Iran says next round of nuclear talks with U.S. will be in Oman, not Rome. And a crisis at a British steel mill has cast a shadow over the UK China relations and all in that way. So, British steel to get supplies to keep furnaces burning. And definitely, some folks are asking how much vital UK infrastructure does China own? So, that's something else that is coming up in the news as well. So, a lot of people are paying attention to that and seeing what is going on in that space. Britain has secured a fuel shipment to keep its last steel blast furnaces lit. So definitely that is something going on as definitely British Steel is getting supplies to keep those furnaces burning. And Xi Jinping is urging Vietnam to oppose Donald Trump's tariff bullying. So China and Vietnam have signed a deal as Xi visits Hanoi amid U.S. tariff tensions. Trump's China-Vietnam claim is there in the news as well. And there's definitely some China's chip trade wars, trader woes as well. So it looks like Xi Jinping is going on a charm offensive as Asia reels from the tariff whiplash. And Hungary passes a constitutional amendment to ban LGBTQ plus public events, and definitely that is seen as an event for, a major win for certain parts of that political structure and all along those lines. So Hungary's parliament votes to limit the rights of dual nationals and LGBTQ plus people. So definitely that is something that is being reported as well. And Sudan, the pathway to peace talks in London, bring together the EU, UK, and AU. So, in the Sudan conflict, the BBC smuggles phones into El Fashir to uncover hunger and fear. So, Sudan's civil war has raged for 2 years, and at the end is nowhere in sight. That's another conflict that's been going on in the world for quite some time. And Israel makes new Gaza ceasefire proposal, but prospects appear slim. So Israel proposes a Gaza ceasefire deal to release 10 hostages for hundreds of Palestinians, according to what Hamas says. So definitely it also looks like Israel killed 17 people in Gaza, and Hamas is reviewing the new ceasefire proposal. So that's something else that folks are talking about as well. And the U.S. State Department, Department of State, gave their congratulations to Ecuador's President Noboy on his reelection. So Daniel Noboy consolidated power in Ecuador as the regional right wing gains momentum. So Ecuador president's opponent are contesting his reelection win. So definitely that is something that is going on as well as Ecuador bonds soar as the Trump ally won that key runoff vote and all along those ways. So definitely that is something that we're seeing in the news as well. And the U.S. is derailing the G7 condemnation of Russian missile strikes on Ukraine. So Russia's Palm Sunday attack against Ukraine triggers calls for more U.S. pressure on Putin. And Trump administration stops the G7 from condemning Russia over the Sumi strikes, according to Bloomberg. So definitely that is something that is another one of those conflicts in the world that is continuing to go on. And Singapore announces its general election on May 3rd and has dissolved their parliament. So Singapore will be holding general elections on May 3rd, and the parliament was dissolved ahead of that general election. Nomination day will be on April 23rd. And in Sudan, hundreds killed in attacks on famine hit displacement camps. So definitely that's something that folks are talking about in the Sudan war. Hundreds may have been killed in the recent Darfur attacks. So up to 400,000 displaced from the Darfur camp after Sudan RSF takeover, UN agency says. So, like I said, there's a lot going on around the world and in the world, which is what we love to talk about here on a World Edition. Mayor Adams is in the Dominican Republic, so his controversial deputy is running things in New York City, all along those lines. And the death toll from the Dominican club roof collapse rises to 225 after 4 died overnight a few days, and all along those lines. So definitely it looks like the relatives of some of the victims are pressing charges against the owner, and all in that space. And French prisons have been hit by a wave of overnight attacks, wave of coordinated attacks targeted the French prisons. Multiple French prisons attacked in response to the government's narco crackdown, according to the ministers of that area. So definitely it looks like several prisons in France were attacked with guns fired and vehicles burned. And a captured Chinese soldier said videos on China's TikTok convinced him to join the Russian army. The Chinese man who said he fought for Russia said he couldn't even go to the bathroom without an armed escort. Everything we heard from Russia was a lie. China is what a Chinese fighter captured by Ukraine said as they spoke out. So that's something that we're hearing as well. Trump, tariffs, and the world in transition, brace for the in-between. So trade wars are easy to lose. Beijing has escalation dominance in the U.S.-China tariff fight, according to some reports that came out last week. So some folks are asking how Trump trade wars with China will hurt the American farmer who voted him in. And a U.S. Caribbean community condemns plans by gangs and allies to overthrow Haiti. So the Haiti's government adopts a war budget as town after town falls to gangs. So we're hearing that in the news as well. So lots going on in that space, and a lot's taking place in that way. So support of the Haitian transitional government and CARICOM as the Haitian government adopts a war budget as town after town falls to gangs. And Japan's Expo 2025 revised memories of the Tokyo Olympics cost blowout. So Osaka Expo draws 119,000 visitors on opening day amid rain. So that's something that is being reported in the news as well. And military leaders are definitely having a lot going on in that space, as well as military leaders win presidential election in Gabon. Gabon leader Ngomi elected president with 90.35% of the vote, according to the interior minister. Gabon's junta chase wins the presidency by the landslide, provisional results show. So definitely a lot's going on. Doesn't matter which continent you're in, and all in that space. As a matter of fact, there's even some news coming out of where Nick's at, Spain, and it actually involves an animal that I like and everything, cats. So Spanish police have pounced on an exotic cat smuggling ring, and police arrested the couple for breeding and selling exotic cats in Spain. So they were arrested for selling exotic cats, including protected species like the white tigers and the pumas. So I guess they were having those cats in their house. And I'll have to ask Nick about that. Maybe he stumbled across them, because I'm not sure which part of Spain it was in, and all along those lines. And President Trump has teed off on 60 Minutes again, threatening CBS broadcast license. So Trump urges the FCC to punish 60 Minutes over reports on Greenland and Ukraine. So he said President Trump says CBS and 60 Minutes should pay a big price for going after him. So that's something else that we're seeing in the news as well. So Trump is definitely staying in the news on a regular basis, and he was not too happy with the fine folks over there at 60 Minutes. And Harvard's president rejected Trump's demand, and Harvard's decision to resist Trump is of momentous significance. And Obama and Yale faculty are backing Harvard as Trump cuts $2 billion alleging anti-Semitism. So we'll see how that goes as well, because I know Obama was definitely coming out in favor of Harvard. And a man accused of setting fire to Pennsylvania governor's home was denied bail. So the fire chief suggests closed door saved the lives in fire at Governor Josh Shapiro's home. And some people are asking, who is Cody Allen Balmer? That's the suspect that is accused of the arson attack on Governor Shapiro's home. And Democratic lawmakers said they'll travel to El Salvador to push for the release of Kilmore Abrego and all along those lines. So we'll Hear how that goes. In Trump's meeting with El Salvador's President Bukele, the Oval Office becomes a set piece, is what the New York Times is saying. So El Salvador and the U.S. say they won't help return Abrigo Garcia after he was mistakenly deported. So we'll see how that all plays out as well. And a Palestinian Colombia activist, Mohsen Madawi, was arrested by the DHS at a citizenship interview. So they were arrested at their U.S. citizenship interview, and they have been apparently this Columbia student has been detained while attending naturalization ceremony, according to what the lawyers are saying in that case. And 2 hikers are stranded in the remote areas of Arizona desert, rescued in separate incidents. And Russian warplanes are flying near Alaska, and they're being tracked by the U.S. military. And I know in the past, Sasha has talked about Russia and Alaska being fairly close to each other. So Russian military aircraft detected off of Alaska Defense Zone, NORAD says. So 176 Air Defense Squadron Fields state-of-the-art battle command center was in the forefront of the news as well. So it does look like Russian military aircraft was spotted near Alaska, and some folks are asking, is this a threat of war? So definitely, and some California insiders are saying may to a potential Kamala Harris for governor run. So Kamala Harris wants to open a think tank. Haters are calling it Coconut Tree Institute. And Kamala Harris is mocked on social media for reported interest in creating an institute for policy and ideas. So it looks like she is staying in the game. As the former VP mulls her next step, Washington or Sacramento. So definitely that's a lot going on in the world. And the elephants formed an alert circle to protect their young as quake shakes the San Diego Zoo safari. I'd actually seen that on social media myself as well. So definitely we're seeing a lot of stuff going on in that space. So, and the CEO of the helicopter sightseeing company whose New York chopper crash killed 6 has been fired. So that's something else that we're seeing in the news as well. And the judge has blocked the Trump from revoking the legal status of 530,000 immigrants flown into the U.S. under Biden. So lots going on in the world, and we'll be talking about a number of these things and all along those lines. I see that I've got Sasha with me. I think Nick's with me. I don't know that I saw anybody else and all along those lines, but definitely lots going on. Oh, yeah, there we got Nick with me and everything. So we'll bring Nick up as well. Nick, did you run across any of those exotic cats? Spain,
No,
and if not, why not? And how's life going? Because I know they were talking about in the news as well.
seen no cats since I've been in Spain. Only dogs, lots of dogs.
You got that muffled voice thing going on.
But uno momento, por favor.
Nick. He got that muffled voice thing going on. You might have to go out and back in because I'm hearing that muffled voice. Yeah, you might have to go back out and in because I was hearing a muffled voice. Hey, Sasha, how are you doing?
Okay, thanks, Mark, for asking. Good.
Sasha?
Can you hear me? Mark?
Yeah, we can hear you, Sasha.
How's things going with you, Sasha?
Oh, yes, I said thank you for asking. I'm doing fine.
Yeah, well, I think Mark's having the problems, not me. So
yeah,
but,
good, yeah.
Yeah, I've watched the dollar kind of get beat up. The euro's beating the dollar pretty bad right now. It's down from like a month ago. It was 97 cents. So if you had a dollar, you get 97 euros. Now you get 88 euros, which, by the way, isn't good. Because, for at least for me, because I make my money in the U.S. It has to come over here. Now it gets to buy less. So things are more expensive. Good. That's the bad news. Good news, I transferred a lot of money over here before this happened, thinking it might happen, and I needed to have a lot of reserves here. So from that standpoint, I really don't care. But the other place I actually do care. Also today, later on Lawyers Den, we're going to look at Trump versus CBS. So we also have Dr. Sharif here, and we also have, let's see, Kim's sort of here, but sort of not. And we have Rick Grosner here. But here's the CBS lawsuit. You will love this one. First of all, it's for $20 billion. All
Okay,
right.
nice number.
Okay. Nice number. Okay. So Trump, in his infinite wisdom, decided to sue CBS for $20 billion. Here's the reason why. They edited a lot of Kamala Harris's interview with Whitaker on 60 Minutes to make her look good, because she was rumbling around and stumbling around and, basically wasn't very coherent. So what they do is they edit it to make her look good, which is reasonable. That's what you do on television. Now, here's the problem I have with the lawsuit, and I got to look at this further. It's Donald is the damages of $10 billion. The reason for the damages is he believed he could raise $10 billion from his supporters if she looked normal and they didn't make her look good. Okay, which is hypothetical, number one. Number two, I'm not sure if Donald Trump's the proper party. The proper party should be the campaign for Donald Trump. Donald Trump wasn't injured; it was a campaign. So if you're asking $10 billion, it should be that. So I've gone through the lawsuit we're going to be discussing on Lawyer's Den, but I'm not sure if I think he failed to join in an indispensable party, which is a motion to dismiss, which means this isn't going anywhere. I don't know what your thoughts are, Rick, but
my thoughts are he's filed several of these lawsuits against. He did one against ABC for similarly bullshit reasons, and ABC folded. So this lawsuit against CBS is garbage. He's suing them for stuff that has been done with him too. His interviews have been shortened for clarity, right? So he's got no case, I believe, but that doesn't mean that CBS won't settle for some amount of money just to bend the knee and keep him off his back.
Well, what's interesting though is I'm not sure if he's the proper party. In other words, if you're alleging the damages should go to my campaign, then his campaign needs to join in on the suit.
Yeah, but he doesn't care. Anybody can sue anybody for anything.
No, they can, but will you survive what they call a 12B6 motion, otherwise known as a motion for dismissal?
Yeah, but they don't care about. Trump doesn't care about surviving his case.
Yeah.
What he cares about is, what CBS cares about is surviving him as president.
Well, also, I think the $20 billion was to make a splash, because you also look at it from another viewpoint. See, I'm looking at an issue of damages already. That would be like 4 or 5 times his net worth. And the value of being the president of the United States, the job is like $400,000 a year.
Well, what happens if, I've been pissed at people, and I've thought about, I sued ABC over a quiz show question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yeah.
And, I didn't win, and it cost me some money. But what would happen to make a splash? Just tell me, if I sued somebody for $20 billion, it would go to court.
Yeah.
And you can tell me, but the judge would say this is frivolous and would hit me with sanctions, right?
Right.
And how much would it cost me?
Well, it depends. Usually the sanctions aren't that much. I mean, usually it'd be like $300-400, maybe $600.
So for $400, I could sue somebody I was pissed off at for $20 billion and get all that publicity for free.
Well, the problem is no one cares about Rick Rosner's lawsuit. They do care about Donald Trump's, but it looks to me to be a publicity stunt. It's the same when who was that? Hans Niemann sued Magnus Carlsen for $10 million. They settled out of court. I don't know what he got because he settled out of court, but he didn't get close to the $10 million he was asking for. Trump is going to get close to the $10 billion, now $20 billion that he's asking for. The question is, does it have any value at all? I'm not sure. It may have some merit because there was editorial, and I think what he was trying to do is bring this to the attention of the American public, is that a lot of the stuff you see on television is kind of made up in doctrine, but it goes on both sides. I mean, I was watching Fox News, and they were just lying about the results of the elections in Arizona. Literally lying. They said, this person's going to win 100%. Person lost. The Republicans are going to take Arizona. The Republicans didn't take. And so that stuff goes on all the time. So it has so many. The way I look at it, when I look at litigation, you have a chance to win, and you have so many chances to lose. What's the odds of this case winning? Probably less than 1%. You always have a chance, but it's not very big. Anyway, we're going to be discussing on Lawyer's Den later on tonight around 7 o'clock. I think it's an interesting case because there's another way to lose, which is the First Amendment. So you've got so many different ways to lose: indispensable party, First Amendment, damages, overreach. I mean, it just goes on and on. And when I looked at the complaint, but here's what he also did: he forum shot. It's being filed in the Northern District of Texas, which is Trump territory, and he may have appointed one of the federal judges there. So what could be better than going in front of a judge that you appointed? I'm just going like, it's absolutely amazing that he even filed this suit. And where does he have time to go through all the discovery and be president of the United States at the same time? So basically, I just don't get it. I saw it, but I'm just going, are you serious? How can he maintain all these lawsuits and get up in the morning? I don't know. All I can think is that he shields himself with immunity for the defense, and he'll go to depositions on the offense whenever he needs to. But in terms of keeping track of it, forget it. Then you look at the law firm. The law firms aren't your white-shoed top-line firms that file the suits. They're just regular firms that go out and file the suits. Anyway, it makes it very interesting. Sharif probably doesn't care. He's in Bangladesh, so he's immune from all the circus that came to town here in Washington, D.C. But you're not immune. Donald Trump can get you in Bangladesh by putting tariffs on all the clothes that I'm buying in Bangladesh.
But all this is just flooding the zone. For instance, I'm looking at Drudge. We're talking about this ridiculous lawsuit. On the other hand, here's a story that the Trump administration is being sued themselves for taking down a public spending tracker. There's apparently some app where you can see how much this administration is spending compared to previous administrations. And he's been outspending Biden, so they took it down. But
really?
You didn't read
Well,
about
there's another lawsuit. Harvard is suing him for threatening to take away a lot of their grants.
Right, but all that stuff just floods the zone and distracts you from.
Well, no, it's great for lawyers because they get billable hours everywhere you go.
Yeah,
So
but all this
we-
stuff distracts people from stuff that they should be paying attention to.
Well, that's the problem. The real problem is you have real problems in the United States. Social Security going bankrupt. The United States. Don't tell Sharif that we're 37 trillion in debt, and even though we're attempting to cut expenses, at the same time we've got a runaway Congress that wants to decrease taxes here, which means you're going to go nowhere. It'll increase the national debt, making the United States even.
Well, here's another story. Trump has cut off $2.2 billion in federal funds to Harvard University because of anti-Semitism at Harvard. Now, I doubt there's like serious anti-Semitism at Harvard. What happened was there were pro-Gaza, pro-Palestinian protests on campus, which is people's right. And so Trump has cut off funding to at least 6 major universities to the tune of many billions of dollars to combat anti-Semitism, which is BS. But that's just one more thing to play to the base and to distract people from like tariff chaos.
Yeah. I agree. I know you can't see me, and I was just having technical difficulties. But Nick, to kind of get back to your CBS lawsuit, I think people should be suing Sean Hannity for interviewing Trump and seriously editing out that. I have the full copy of the interview. I uploaded 21 seconds worth of it, where he's just like, focus on he asked Trump the same question 3 times, and Trump went off into a rampage about anything else to answer the question. And he finally asked Trump to focus on this question I'm asking you. Focus on the answer. So they didn't use the whole interview, Nick. They didn't put the whole interview up. If they had, I would have had him committed. No, it's over in media assets. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom
Oh,
of the
no, no,
video
I was
clips, you'll
actually,
see the here. It's this.
I put a
For focus.
phone number so we can call the U.S. Senate while we're here. Call some of the senators.
Can I bring up another story while you're
Oh,
doing
there you
that?
go. The phone numbers. You know, when I posted phone numbers like that an email list on TikTok, they took me down.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they took me down
Well, I
for
don't know why.
sharing the email list of contacts to, voice your
10%.
opinion.
Focus
And
on those that want people to believe that you want retribution, that you will use the system of justice to go after your political enemies.
So, number one, they're wrong. It has to stop because otherwise we're not going to have a country. Look, when this election is over, based on what.
But
Where's the rest?
if you listen to the very beginning of that, which slightly got cut off, you will hear him say, focus on, like he asked Trump, I'll pull the full video, I have it, because I knew that they were going to make sure that disappears. But I have the full video, and there are several more like that. They edited Trump like crazy, like super MAGA crazy, to make sure he didn't sound crazy. But I will guarantee you, if anyone heard that full interview and watched the full interview that wasn't edited, they all would have had him committed. I'm just saying, except for the MAGA asses who are so brainwashed that they make up excuses. Oh, he was tired. He had too many interviews that week. Well, but don't sit there and go around saying somebody edited a few words out of Harris and cleaned that up, and not say they didn't do it for Trump, because that's not true.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, right.
Here's a non-Trump story. Sam Altman, the guy who runs ChatGPT, says that artificial general intelligence is here, that ChatGPT is now as smart, smarter than most humans. So
yeah, I agree.
Well,
I've got young friends, young people, not old people, but young friends who are going to ChatGPT as a therapist. They're literally going to them for their therapy and absolution for their actions.
yeah.
Hey, ChatGPT, is this okay? Can I do this? Or should I write this? Or should I say this? How do I reply to this person? Yeah, people are using it like that.
Well,
It's
just to
scary.
test it out, I asked ChatGPT a couple dating questions. What day is today? Yesterday was
15.
my 34th wedding anniversary, so I don't need dating advice. But I asked it because I think that's one of the places where people can go. People give a ton of bad dating advice, so I wanted to see if ChatGPT would avoid that trap, and it gave highly reasonable advice. Probably better.
I mean, it's not. Its experience is based on what the world has fed it.
Right.
So it takes an analysis of everyone's input and
right,
the results.
but it must be able to filter out the tons of terrible advice and figure out what makes sense.
So I think if it ran an analysis on a hyperlink computer, like the quantum computers, instantaneously it could give you, based on status results of outcomes versus what people.
Quantum computers aren't set up to do anything that complicated yet. But
but if it was operating at a speed of that rate, it could give it to you instant. But it's been calculating for years. Think about it. It's been taking input versus outcomes for years. I mean,
and right now, the chess players, the computers are the best chess players in the world.
Well, let's ask Sasha, what does this mean anything for the companies that you follow, like NVIDIA? But now that AI is right in the realm of being smarter than your smartest friends.
It's hard to say. I don't think that it's been adopted wide enough to make any conclusions. What's interesting today is that the breaking news is that China has stopped delivering Boeing aircrafts in total, full stop period. That sent stock of Boeing down substantially, and they will most likely have talks with Airbus and get their planes from Airbus instead of Boeing. The tourism to United States, not only from Canada but from all over the world, has basically stopped. There are no more people arriving to United States, and there are several cases. Like, for example, there was a science conference, and there was a professor from China, and on the way back, he was stopped at the airport and asked to show up and give control of his smartphone. And he was held at the border for long enough, and only then he was allowed to proceed. And so therefore people are trying to avoid us as a destination as much as possible. And for me, even I avoided even as a stopover on, let's see, if I'm flying to the Caribbean on a cruise ship, I would I avoid at all cost any stopover to US. I avoid any change of planes in US. I avoid any cruise that starts its journey from Florida or anywhere else in the States. So this is where we are. I think that explains why the U.S. dollar is down. It explains why there are about. I was mistaken. It's not seven. It's $9 trillion has to be refinanced this year alone, and we'll see how that will work out. This is something much more important than dogs and cats and whatever other nonsense that people are
Wait,
so
you're saying
concerned.
that 1/4 of America's national debt has to be refinanced through
This year.
that?
This year until December 31st of this year, 9 trillion have to be refinanced.
And will we have to offer high interest on those T-bills to
The
get people
interest
to buy
rates,
them?
yeah,
Most
the interest rates are going up. They went up about 200 basis points already, Rick, which means our national debt, the interest on national debt is going to be more expensive. It means that's the reason I want to talk to these people in Washington, because this isn't rocket science. This is simple math. Your debt is increasing. Your interest on your debt's increasing. You made one good move on the chessboard trying to reduce your expenses, but then you blundered your queen away by saying, we're going to give tax cuts. You can't give tax cuts right now. That's impossible. That is stupid. Wait, smart person, Dr. Shreve has something to say.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Nick, you can invite Trump in this TV show. He will join.
Oh, but you just have to wade through all the gatekeepers. That's the reason I was going to start calling the senators up, because I've met with a lot of them before in the past when my PAC, which was the 12th largest PAC in the United States, had meetings with them every once a year. So I used to go to Washington and talk to them. Speaking about talking, Jennifer has joined us, and I don't know where from. She must be a guest of Mark, but Mark has disappeared. So Jennifer, tell us a little about yourself, where you're from, what you do, before we disappear. Okay.
Hi. Well, I'm currently in Tucson, Arizona, but I'm from the Midwest, and I used to live in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a nice activist community. And I was a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Really?
Yeah, I taught modern Middle Eastern history and politics, and I also taught a number of English courses. So, and I'm talking to you on my phone, so I hope it's coming through.
Okay. And where did you? Are you teaching right now in Tucson? Or are you not teaching?
No, right now I'm doing a lot of editing, and I taught for about 35 years, so I think I've had enough teaching for a while.
35 years. How long were you teaching at University of Wisconsin-Madison? Is that where you're teaching?
Yeah, I
How
taught
long were
there.
you there for?
I was there almost 30 years.
Whoa, that's a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah, a very long time. And I taught at Penn State, but for a very short time. My daughter currently attends Penn State.
Mhm.
And yeah, I've traveled quite a bit. So I used to live in the Gaza Strip and also in Beirut, Lebanon.
Yeah,
And I've traveled a lot in the region.
yeah. Yeah, I taught at Northeastern for 12 years and as an adjunct professor for the graduate tax program, subject matter expert on qualified plans, which is a weird thing. No
Hey,
one really
Jennifer.
wants to know about, but
So
that's
it
okay.
would
Hey,
include
you're very live.
as
Yeah,
Hey,
go.
Jennifer, glad you made it and everything. Sorry I was late. I know you were having your appointment with the cat and everything, but I know one reason I reached out to you was because you have a lot of knowledge about what's going on in Gaza with the Gaza situation and all along those lines. And you've done a lot of research around that. And you were even talking about the humanitarian aid and what's happening in that space, as well as how it could be jeopardizing the whole situation in Israel with the hostages if there are still hostages out there and everything. So just wondering your take on that, and if you could just share a little bit about your own background and what you have learned about what's going on in Israel.
Oh, well, I've been following it fairly closely. I mean, I always follow the news in the region, so I've been sort of glued to the news for the last year and a half, especially. And I think the full impact of what's happening over there has really taken a toll on me, and I'm sure on many other people, because it's just so horrific. I see this as an end game for Israel. It's hoping. I actually think that we are on the brink of a mass expulsion out of Gaza, along with all of these, mass killings. It is a genocidal campaign. There's no question about it. And I have a lot of friends there, so it affects me in many ways. Yes.
So
Tell me a little bit about your own history and how Israel impacts you, and just a little bit more about your uh, ties to that region. That's what I was looking for.
Oh, okay. Um, I grew up in a very secular family, but uh, Jewish culturally. So I did have that. We were not an observant family by any means. Um, but I had an attachment to the idea of Israel when I grew up and went there when I was a junior in college to go explore Israel and see what it was like. I think many young kids do have that feeling. But it wasn't long for me after being there that I had a lot of questions about what I was seeing. I was really quite disappointed. Um, I think I was there back in 1981 when I was a junior in college, and um, even then, well, but of course, there were blatant signs of racism, of a kind of Jewish supremacism that has become much more pronounced today. I started to question it very much that year in 1981. I came back to the US in January of 1982, and I had a lot of questions in my head, but it was the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982 that really, I think, forced me to confront a lot of the questions that I had. I often tell the story that I think I was lying in bed on a Saturday morning in September in 1982 after that whole summer of Israeli siege and bombardment of Beirut. And the news came on. I suppose I was listening to National Public Radio, and the story of Sabra and Shatila broke. And I remember lying there thinking, I just can't support the state. This is, up until then, it was just this tug of war. And I think that tipped the scale completely. I think that was the turning point for me where I just said, I don't want any part of this. And I'm really happy to say that my family background encouraged that. My parents were old lefties. They protested the Vietnam War. They were very supportive of the civil rights movement. My mom was an admirer of King. And so when we were little kids, she used to talk about that with us. And interestingly, that stuff stuck with me. So that, as I said, when I first got to Israel in 1981, the racism between of Israeli Jews towards Palestinian Arabs was so blatant to me. And it was always funny because a lot of people said, oh, it doesn't really exist. And, oh, they coexist perfectly fine. But it was really clear to me, I was applying my values from home in this situation. And I was shaking my head like, I don't like this. I saw things even among the members of the group I was with that really turned me off. People imitating Arabic in a way that was so offensive and, saying things. I remember, here's an interesting tidbit. When I was in Israel, I remember a small group of people within the group of students I was with decided to bring Meir Kahane to come speak to us. And, even back then, I knew what a toxic figure he was. But I did go and listen to him, and he was absolutely revolting. I left the talk early because it was so revolting. And so, those values were already there, that deep rejection of this kind of racism and superiority. But as I said, I think that whole summer of 1982 had a very profound impact on me, influence on me.
All right, so let's get to current stuff. I too am a mostly secular Jew, and I'm pained by. I mean, obviously, Hamas has to be fought, but I'm pained by the supremacy of far right politicians in Israeli politics and the kind of the gleefulness with which they prosecute some of these actions. But my question to you is about what's going on in America. So I assume, by following what's going on in Palestine, you're also following the protests on U.S. campuses, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been to a
my
number of them
question for
too.
you is, do you see, I'm sure there might be isolated incidents of, people saying anti-Semitic stuff, but in general, do you see anything anti-Semitic about the pro-Gaza protests on campus? Mike, with the key being that Trump has canceled billions of dollars in funding to U.S. universities because pro-Gaza protests happened on their campuses, and I don't think it has anything to do with making Jews safer. I think it has everything to do with screwing higher education.
Oh, absolutely. I think anti-Semitism, the real anti-Semitism, the hatred of Jews for being Jews, I don't see that as a particularly strong element in any of this. I would never say it doesn't exist.
Well, at UCLA, we did have an incident where some Proud Boy type guys thought were like, oh, this is going to be an opportunity to bust some heads. So they took the chance to come onto campus to I don't know, knock people around. But they're not defenders of anything. They just wanted to mess people up.
Well, and they're, at least right now, they're still a fringe group. I mean, I think our dear President Trump has helped try to push them mainstream, and that's really ugly. But we could say a lot about Donald Trump and his connections to people like Miriam Adelson as well. I think what's happening on college campuses, or especially last year, it was the ugliest use of a phrase, anti-Semitism. It has taken on a whole new meaning, and it's become entirely political. It's, an anti-Semite, quote unquote, today is somebody who has the audacity to criticize Israel and to talk about what it's doing unashamedly. That it's not anti-Semitic to do that. I remember I used to correspond with Noam Chomsky when he was still around, and I mean, for 30 years we were close correspondents, and he used to, just say anti-Semitism is so marginal in our society, and to puff it up the way it's been. There's much worse Islamophobia.
It's big. I mean, okay, so both things have expanded hugely in the past few years. The number of anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S., even as a couple of years ago, have tripled, according to the FBI. So there is a lot of, but a lot of extremist people and extremist groups are using the excuse of the Israel-Gaza war to push forward their own pre-existing anti-Semitism.
Yes, I mean, as I said, I don't think I would never say it doesn't exist, but I think compared to anti-Arab racism and Islamophobia, I don't think anti-Semitism is a blip on the screen.
Well,
our hatred of Arabs
I disagree
is
there. I
much
think
worse.
it's pretty huge. But I mean,
I disagree.
all right.
I don't
Just really
think
quickly along those same lines and everything. Yeah, just really quickly along those same lines, Jennifer. I was just wondering, because we've had this discussion on the network before, and there are some that think that it can happen, some that think that it can happen. But do you think that there should be a Palestinian state, and that there is even the possibility of a Palestinian state? Because I know that there are some people on this network that have given the impression that the two cannot coexist, and that they should have set that up a long time ago, and along those lines and everything. But I was just wondering your take on the notion of whether a Palestinian state can exist.
Well, it can and it should exist. It should have existed 80 years ago. There's no question that if you look carefully at Israeli policies since 1947, before Israel was Israel, the principal trajectory, or the main thrust of Israeli history has been to prevent a Palestinian state, to expel Palestinians, to marginalize them, to isolate them in ghettos in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. I think it's obscene what has been done to the Palestinians. And as I said, that was clear to me 40 some years ago, and it's gotten much, much worse. I've been back to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip more times than I can count in the last 20 years. And the situation has gotten worse and worse and worse. I lived in Gaza. I know what it's like to live there. The treatment of Palestinian Arabs by the Israelis is, it defies description in many ways. It's just abhorrent. It's terrible.
Sasha will rebut, but I also want to say that the Palestinians have been kind of complicit through their own terrible leadership. They're corrupt.
I disagree. I completely disagree. I've never thought, when Arafat was still around, no, I didn't think he was a particularly great leader. And the Palestinian Liberation Organization didn't do a whole lot to win Western support for many years. That's true. But this is a problem that was the creation of Israel and its allies from the beginning. You said something early on about, of course, Hamas must be fought. We could get into that. It would take another couple of hours to go through that. Hamas has been negotiating or attempting to negotiate with Israel for decades, and every single step of the way it has been blocked and railroaded by the Israelis. That's not a compliment to Hamas in the sense of, very few people know the first thing about that organization. I interviewed Ismail Haniyeh and Mahmoud Zahar back in the first decade of the 2000s when Hamas came to power in the Gaza Strip. And I have an understanding of this group. Again, I don't support its ideology. I don't like its ideology. It's an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. It fuses religion and nationalism, all the kinds of things I dislike. And I don't think October 7th, I don't believe you should slaughter people in any situation at any time. So, people are always looking for you to condemn that day. Of course, I condemn the slaughter of innocent civilians. I do not condemn Hamas for trying to disable the military checkpoints, to breach the prison wall, as it were, of the Gaza Strip, and to attack the Israeli army. I don't oppose that. If Hamas had not also killed innocent civilians, which I never excuse on the part of any group, I would have supported what it did, because I followed it for a long enough time to know that even back in 1988, some of the leadership of Hamas, when it was a brand new organization, may have been close in the 90s, we're talking to Shimon Peres, for example, saying, we'll recognize Israel if you just, give us Gaza and the West Bank. Israel is the party that has always rejected the overtures towards peace. Every single time. And our media portrays it exactly the opposite. You have this, infamous phase of the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. That's used over and over and over again. And it's simply a lie, because the people who have been pushing the notion of greater Israel have been blockading it, have been rejecting any effort whatsoever to build any kind of rapport or relationship.
Let Sasha respond.
Yeah, I wanted
Yes.
Sasha to respond.
Jennifer, you're a very well-spoken woman, but you have vinaigrette in your head. You are twisting facts. You are lying along the way. I'm sorry to say
No,
that.
I'm not.
Your facts are twisted.
No,
The
they're not.
Israelis in 47 didn't even exist as a nation.
I know,
They
I said
existed in
that.
48. And they were attacked numerous times. Let me speak. Enough. They were attacked by Arab nations several times. And Arabs were losing any single war. What about some kind of second state in the land of Israel? The land of Israel is, as a result of war in 67, in 73, Yom Kippur War, Arabs have no rights to any territory in Israel, whether it's a West Bank, whether it's a Gaza, or anything else. They have to be evicted and get out of Israel. They lost. There is a very good book by Victor Hansen Davis, The End of Everything. And what he's talking about, there were cases throughout history when some civilizations simply ceased to exist. They were absolutely destroyed, evaporated, and ceased. Same thing is happening now to Palestinians. That Palestinians who never even existed until 1947, they run to the end of their run. That's the end of story. They will have to be evicted to some other countries, the Kuwait, Egypt, Jordan, whoever will take them. If nobody will take them, then just go to sea and just keep drowning there. They have no rights to that land. It's a land of Israel. And nobody should criticize, especially you as being a Jewish person. You create a whole new damage to Israel. And you should really, I wish, to keep your mouth shut. Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to keep my mouth shut, so you're out of luck there. And I
Well, you
think
can
what you
talk
just
as much
what
as
you
you
just
want. You're
described to
talking
me,
nonsense,
what
and
you
your
just
nonsense
said
should not be
sounds to
heard at
me
all.
like
All right,
what
Because
Ben
it's
Gvir and
really
Smotrich are
very, very
saying.
evil thought. What you're doing is very, very evil. And if I were you, I would just shut up. Okay?
No, I
Sasha,
refuse to shut up, and
But I'm telling you.
I think that the history
No, no,
that
no, no. What you think is
Sasha,
nonsense.
All right, so hold
You're
on.
well spoken, and I wish you would apply your talents to something else, not to Israel-Arab question, which you are profound and you don't understand that at all.
oh, I understand it extremely well.
Not at all. You think that you understand it, but you don't.
You sound like Ben Gvir. You sound like Smotrich. You're talking. That land has been Palestinian for the last 2,000 years.
There were
In
no
my view,
Palestinians until 1947.
oh,
They
that's
were just Arabs, same as they were subjects of Turkey Empire. There were no such thing as Palestinians.
there were no such
Period.
thing as
The
Franks or
Jews were there
Germans either.
forever, Palestinians not.
There were no
What
such
is the
thing as
culture of
Italians until
Palestinians?
till 1861. There was no such thing as a German until
No,
1870.
I'm not talking about the government.
No, I'm
Country.
talking
I'm
about
talking about the
nationalism. I'm
nationalism.
talking about nationalism. Nationalism took hold in Europe during the 19th century.
There were
no
no
such thing as
Palestinian
any of
nation
these
as such.
places.
They were Arabs, but not Palestinians.
Of course there were
Palestinians is the
Palestinians.
invention of Soviet Union. That's what Palestinians, KGB is Palestinians. This is all what you are trying to defend. And it makes me sick to listen to a person of your stature to say such a awful, idiotic, and untruthful things. And I hope you will stop right there. Okay, thank you. That's enough for me. Bye.
Do you want me to respond, or?
Yes, if you would respond, please, and everything. Like I said, I know Sasha's going to start his Ukraine-Russia show, but I definitely want you to respond to what he said and to your thoughts around that, and Netanyahu as well. But definitely, I would want you to respond.
What he was just expressing are the views of the most right-wing settlers and, of course, the Netanyahu government in Israel. These are people, the Palestinians never existed. Why? Because they weren't given the name. They were always there. They always had their own dialect. They always had their own culture. They had their own customs. They had their own clothing and cuisine. It was given a label in 1947, 48. And I didn't say Israel was a state in 47. In fact, I specifically said even before Israel was a state in 47. What he's talking about is so offensive. He's basically justifying what is happening in the Gaza Strip. The people who have a right to that land are the people who have been there continuously for the last 2,000 plus years. Personally, as an anti-Zionist, I would never have supported a Jewish state to begin with. And I really find that there is so much ignorance around the history of Israel and why it was even created. The whole notion of statehood for Israel wasn't really part of the mainstream Zionist platform until the Biltmore Convention in it was either 41 or 42. There were Zionists who opposed a Jewish state. But then you've got the whole notion of Zionism was changed radically since back in the 30s and 40s.
Wasn't the creation of Israel the reaction to the slaughter of 6 million Jews by Hitler?
It was a reaction to that. Zionism, modern Zionism, was a reaction to vicious anti-Semitism in Europe. But I think what people forget is that it was a very marginal group. The vast majority of Jews, both before and after the Second World War, did not want to go to Palestine. They didn't want to go. In many cases, and there's a book written about this, and I'm kicking myself because I can't think of the author's name, where, the author, who is Jewish and also a survivor of the Second World War and anti-Semitism, who goes into extensive detail to show how Zionist bullies from the Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine, were going through the DP camps, the displaced persons camps, after the Second World War, and threatening people, beating them up, marginalizing them, harming their interests if they didn't support Israel. They were forcing people to go to Palestine, I should say Palestine, before 48, people who didn't want to go. Zionism was a minority group even after the Nazi Holocaust. And, it didn't become such a big thing where you have an entire industry built on the Holocaust until after 1967. The other thing
Hey,
that
Jennifer,
I wanted
just
to
really quickly along those same lines, what do you say to those folks that point to what goes on in Palestine and that whole notion of from the river to the sea? It's something that we hear about in the protests. It's something I know Sasha has brought up before. I think that is more of like a saying that is misunderstood and everything like that. But what do you say to people that bring up that notion of from the river to the sea?
That notion has been around for so long. I mean, when I was a freshman in college, people were saying river to the sea. The Palestinian people happen to live in the area of, between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. Now you also have Jewish Israelis there. And the fact of the matter is, the Palestinians in that area should be free. Everybody in that area should be free. The river to the sea is just, it's like saying
Everybody,
West Coast,
the common meaning, the main meaning is that, the Jews should be pushed into the Mediterranean.
That's actually another myth. That was never the case. This guy who was on before talking about how the Arabs attacked, first of all, the Arab states, in my view, in the 30s and 40s, who saw European Jews coming and colonizing land, not with their permission, but with the permission of the number one colonial imperial power in the world, which is Great Britain, they're going to say, no, this is our place. We don't want European colonialism here. The Jews who initially went to Palestine back as early as the late 1890s and the first decade of the 1900s, these people were Europeans. They were Europeans. This was colonialism. It was Great Britain handing a slice of the old Ottoman Empire to the modern Zionist organization because it was in their own imperial interest.
I think we can agree that the main screwer uppers of the modern mess in the Mideast were the colonial powers, putting borders where there were never borders before,
right?
But imposing any kind of like national state borders. I mean, anybody would have screwed it up because the modernity, coming to that area where there were nomadic tribes moving back and forth across a lot of this stuff is wasteland, and trying to figure out the borders, anybody would have screwed it up. And the British, they screwed it up really bad.
No, I disagree with that. First of all, most of the peoples of the Middle East were not Bedouins. They were not wanderers. They were settled people. There was a clear Syrian culture. There was also a Lebanese, primarily Christian culture. There was definitely an area of land called Palestine, and there was Transjordan and Cisjordan. The people who lived there, however, were stationary. For the most part, the people living in Palestine were not nomads. They were settled people with a culture.
All right. So was there any chance, say in 1910 or post World War I, for countries to become countries without the mess that we have now?
Of course. In fact, one of the best examples I give is that in the 1919, after the First World War, and we should, I could spend a lot of time on history here. After the First World War, in Syria, for example, there was a grassroots Syrian movement for democracy and a Syrian state, not controlled by the French. It was the Sykes-Picot Agreement that was put into practice, into play at the Paris Peace Conference, and later, where the British and the French primarily carved up the Middle East in ways that they wanted. Syrian nationalism is one of the best examples. There was a whole parliament. There was a constitutional monarchy in the making in Syria, with a parliament, democratic values. That was snuffed out by the French. And you had similar things happening across the Middle East, where there were movements of Arab nationalism there, both pan-Arab and particularist Arab, that had been building up since, the late 19th century. These states could very easily have come into their own existence by themselves without the British and the French going in there and mucking it up. And I have to say, there's something called the Arab facade that I used to teach my students about, and Chomsky used to talk about this as well, where over the last few decades, it's become more and more necessary for Western powers to back Arab despots and to put people like Saddam Hussein, some of the worst characters you can imagine, into power, because if a democratic society had been allowed to grow, it would have been anti-Western. So you have to support the dictators who are going to eat out of the hands of the colonial powers. And that's exactly what we did and are still doing. It's very scary to watch what's happening over there today, especially, and I should say, in Syria. It's, which is now becoming another sphere of influence for the American-Israeli lobby and the Turkish lobby, or the Turkish government.
It's been interesting. Sorry, I got to say goodbye.
Yeah, just really quickly, we're going to wrap up. Glad that Jennifer could join us and everything like that. Just really quickly before we wrap up and everything, I hope you can come back. If you can tell us how folks can reach you and everything like that, and if you can also share your thoughts around the U.S. role in the Middle East, and even how we have shared some of the information with some of the both allies and enemies and everything. But I just wanted your take on the U.S. involvement.
Well, the U.S. involvement has basically the United States took over from Great Britain. Great Britain used to be the #1 imperial power. And, following the Second World War, Britain and France were no longer the powers they used to be. It was the United States. And, we had a chance to go to the Middle East and to be benevolent, so to speak. We didn't take that chance. We acted like every other imperial power. We want to impose our will on the peoples who live there. And it's very natural for those people to object and to say, we don't need, when in following the First World War and the Second World War, the various groups of people in the Middle East were very positive towards America. They had positive feelings about the United States, because up till then it was the one power that hadn't taken advantage of every single group for its own gain. That changed very quickly during the Second World War. There was the U.S.-Saudi alliance was established, and the oil fields in Saudi Arabia were just being, discovered, so to speak. That was for us to exploit in our minds. So, you can go country by country and see how the United States had gotten itself involved in these places in a way. And Iran, for example, is probably the best example, where you had a burgeoning democratic society. You had a leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, in Iran, who was popularly elected, very popular among the people, but he made a huge mistake. he nationalized oil. And the big powers, the big oil powers and the imperial powers didn't like that, because that meant they would lose profits and shares in the oil industry. So what did we do? Did we let Iran become its own nation and, foster the democratic tendencies that were already at play? No, we concocted Operation Ajax, went into Iran and overthrew Mossadegh and installed the Shah, who was a butcher, whose own Savak security forces were trained by the Israeli Mossad in torture techniques. So it's no surprise now that the Americans are the least popular group of people in the entire region.
Yep. It's not surprising at all and everything. If you can tell folks how they can reach you if they want to hear more about your thoughts and this conversation and everything. And just really quickly, I know that at the beginning you said that you were a fan and your family was fans of Dr. King and all along those lines. So I was just wondering what the peace movement looks like in the Middle East, and if there is such a thing as a peace movement in that area, because we're always hearing about the extreme sides on both sides, both the Zionists as well as like the Hamas side and all along those lines. I don't know that we hear enough about the peace movement, and I'm sure there has to be a peace movement that exists in Israel, in the Middle East. So what does that peace movement look like?
Well, I wouldn't call it a peace movement because, first of all, as I said, most of the countries in the Middle East are dictatorships. And these dictatorships are, they're little arms of the US government. They work with American power and they oppress their populations. If they were to lift that lid of oppression, you would see peace movements. You would see protest movements against their own governments. They're not allowed to do that. In Israel, the left is very small. Israel has become very much a right-wing nation. There's no question of that. Just look at the opinion polls. But the peace movement that does exist there, small as it is excellent. You've got groups of like B'Tselem, you've got I'm trying to think, Breaking the Silence. There are a whole number of Israeli groups, people who founded the magazine 972. You've got writers for Haaretz, one of the leading Hebrew press dailies, who are extremely outspoken and who see what's happening and want it to stop. And there have long been people on both sides within Palestinian society as well as in Israeli society who want coexistence, who want to build some kind of relationship. I think that's going to be extremely hard now because, and I'll just make this quick. For example, what people would want to live in the same area of land with a group of people who's trying to exterminate them? You've got a genocidal policy going on. And for all the people who are talking about one state or two states, it doesn't matter what you champion. You've got a population there that has been indoctrinated in Jewish supremacism, in having more and more land, in displacing more and millions of people. And who wants to live with, it's like asking Jews to live with Nazis. I'm sorry to use that term. A lot of people are offended by it, but it happens to be true. In fact, one of the great Hebrew scholars or Judaic scholars, Yeshayahu Leibowitz, coined the term a long time ago, Judeo-Nazis, for these people coming into Israel. And it's that's come to fruition now.
Well, I'm glad that I was able to get you on to give some different perspectives, because as you can tell, we got some people that are more on the leaning on the right side. So I definitely wanted to get some more fairer balance and everything, because I'm definitely one that believes in the need for a Palestinian state my own self and everything. And there are others that believe in more of a liberal notion as well, but then we have others that say that can't happen and that are very Zionistic, for lack of a better term, and everything like that. But I'm just glad that I was able to bring you on, and hopefully we can have you come back on in future shows, and both my own show, The Online Dinner Party, as well as other world editions and world politics and all along those lines, because definitely there are various people that have different views, and that's what I love bringing is an opportunity for people to learn and to learn from each other and all along those lines. So I was glad to have you on, and hopefully we can have you back on if you want to share how folks can reach you if they've been inspired or if they've heard things that they agree with, even if they disagree with, that they can reach out to you. And if you have books, and I can't remember if you have books or not, if you want to pitch those as well, this is your time to do that before we get ready to get on out of here.
Yeah, I didn't hear everything you just said, but just quickly, I run a listserv. Anybody who wants to receive my mailings can email me. My email is it's Sarin J, SARINJ 111 @gmail.com. I'd be happy to put them on my list, write to them, whatever. I would like to just say one thing. Having a host on a radio program tell you to shut your mouth and that you're sick, that's really, he is a very unprofessional person. This is one of the problems with the whole Israel-Palestine argument. You can't have a civilized argument when somebody's telling you to shut your mouth and that you're wicked and whatever. I haven't encountered that in a while, but I was pretty shocked.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll definitely have a conversation about that because I do believe in respecting people's differences and even respecting things that I don't always agree with. So nobody should ever do that, and that's not a good form of journalism. And as one that has a journalism degree from Marquette, I would agree that's something we have to be cognizant of and all along those lines. So definitely you have to respect people and hear differences all along those lines. So definitely that was not cool to say it lightly and everything like that. But I was glad to be able to bring you on. Like I said, I hope that I can have some further conversations with you on this network. And Nick Balvena, who's on here as well as one of the founders of the network. He popped in and out and everything like that. I think he's still in the background and everything like that. But definitely, hopefully you can come back. And even I think Kim might have been here when you first got here because I was having some technical problems on my own computer and everything, which is why I wasn't here when you first arrived and all along those lines and everything like that. But definitely she was here earlier. So I don't know if she was here when you came here or not. But the two founders of the network were here because it's a network that they created to bring awareness to different issues, but to also have a conversation around fiscal responsibility and around other things that they feel mainstream media doesn't cover and all along those lines. So that's part of the reason that they founded Pod TV, which used to be IBN TV.
Thanks. You've been, since just in the last few minutes, it's harder to hear you. So I think I caught all of that, but thank you.
No problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
hold on a second. It might be the other speaker as well. So I'll see if that's better. Can you hear me better now and everything?
A little bit. Yeah.
Hopefully that makes it a little bit better and all along those lines. But I was just saying I greatly respected your thoughts and definitely hope that you can make a return trip and everything like that. Hope the cat has a good appointment because I know that you said you had that cat appointment earlier today, and I am a fan.
Hey, he's here listening.
The cat was listening to the argument and the conversation. So
yeah, he likes it. He's sitting on at the dining room table. He's sitting on a chair and he looks like he's sulking.
he might
I'm
be
ignoring him.
You're ignoring him because he's probably sulking because he knows he's got to go to the doctor. And like many humans, cats and other animals don't like to go to the doctors either and everything.
Yeah,
like
as soon as you take out the cat carrier, then he hides under the bed.
Yes. I used to have a cat, so I know how that is and everything like that. Actually, Nick, who's here, is one of the stories I brought up to him. Is apparently there in Spain, there was folks that when I was doing the news briefs earlier that were apparently arrested for having exotic cats and all along those lines. So they had a big cat ring, but it sounds like they were having the big cats like the tigers and things like that. So they had a big controversy in the country of Spain because Nick was originally here in North Carolina, but he, his wife, and their dog had just moved to Spain about, I think, a month and a half, 2 months ago, and all along those lines. So they are now, and he's one of the two co-founders, but now they live in Spain. So technically, we can say that we are a global network. We have people from all over the country that come in. Shaquille comes in sometimes from Australia. The gentleman that yelled at you is actually in Canada, but now the two founders, one is in the United States in Raleigh, North Carolina, and that being Kim Calhoun, and then Nick used to be in this area, but now he has moved to Spain. So we have both Spanish and North Carolina offices.
Where are you based?
In Durham, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
I actually live just around the corner from Duke University, so I could once I
Yeah, I haven't been there. I've been through North Carolina. I've been to Asheville. It's
yes,
beautiful. It's really beautiful.
yeah, North
Um,
Carolina had some great weather. It's actually been real nice. I think yesterday we got up to 70. There was a slight cold front that went through, and there was a heat wave. There was a couple of days ago, but yeah, it's a beautiful area. Sometimes the pollen can get on people's nerves if they have allergies and stuff like that, but it is
yeah.
very much
Well,
a beautiful.
70s sound nice. We're in the 90s here, and this is April,
Wow,
but that's in the desert. So,
because you're in Arizona, right?
yeah, southern Arizona.
Oh yeah, I had a friend of mine that was teaching in between Vegas and Arizona, so I know that that can be some very hot areas and
Oh
all
my
along those
goodness.
lines.
Yeah, June usually our average around in June is about 110. So definitely gets hot. But I moved here for that reason. I got tired of Midwestern winters.
I can understand that. I've not been back to my school that I graduated from since graduating, and we probably graduated in similar time frames because I graduated in '84, December of '84 from Marquette. And even though I'm a devout Marquette fan in terms of our basketball and even in terms of
Yeah.
keeping up with what we are doing academically through the magazines and everything like that, and even some alumni associations that exist here, and going to some meetings of those associations, try to make it to at least one or two a year and everything. I've not been back to campus since I graduated. So that was '84 to 2025. So we're talking 41 years. I've not been
Yeah,
back.
I was gonna say I graduated in '83, so we're just a year apart. So
Yeah.
yep.
And I have not been back to that weather for exactly that reason. I mean, there are some great things in the Midwest that I would love to go back to. I do event planning in addition to other things, and I
Yep.
would love to go back to Summerfest, but
Hmm.
I'm usually busy during the time of summer, so I don't make it
Yeah.
there when the weather is nicer. But I would love to go back to Summerfest, but I'm not trying to go back in the winter and everything. I used to joke that if friends of mine had life events, whether that was the birth of a child, a marriage, or even if they were having their end of life celebrations and everything, I hope that they would do it in the spring or the summer, because they were doing it in the winter. The chances of me being there were dim to none.
Well, I hear you. Believe me, I avoid going back in the winter like the plague. I mean, I hate cold weather.
Right.
I remember this one guy who moved down to southern Arizona. He was probably in his mid 70s. This was a few years ago. And he was from Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I remember bumping into him at this gift shop. And I said, "What on earth brought you down here to Bisbee?" It was a town south of here. And he says, 37 below.
That would do it.
And I said, "Yeah, I know how that is." Sounds like a good Wisconsin winter. Hasn't been that cold for a while, but yeah, but still, it gets cold and frosty. I don't miss
Yeah, it
it.
definitely gets cold and frosty. And ironically, I had a friend that I dated that was a Green Bay Packers fan, and I am a diehard and became a fan even when before moving up to Wisconsin, a Vikings fan and everything. And I don't know how he became one, but my brother, I think because of one of their big defensive men and all along those lines, has been always a diehard Chicago fan. So that could be some real interesting family dynamics and
Yeah,
everything.
we have
Get
those
together.
too. We've got Packer fans and Lions fans. So yeah, they go head to head at certain times of year.
Definitely during the football season. I can relate to that because actually one of our fellow event planners is a diehard Lions fan, and his family actually runs the Shane Park Amphitheater, and then he does events down here. So that's the
Hmm.
big amphitheater in Detroit. But yeah, he's a diehard Detroit fan. So I do have people that are involved in all the teams in that particular division.
Yeah.
So, and then I've
Well,
got
I mean,
friends.
I grew up in Michigan. So, for example, my brother is a big Lions fan, but his wife is a Packer fan. Oh, they stayed together for a long time, so it must be working out. But I wouldn't want to be around them during football season.
No, it's kind of like being around UNC and Duke people during basketball season, because it can be
Yeah.
some very
Oh, I
intense
know.
rivalries, and I know it can be the same with like Arizona and Arizona State and some of the other two schools that are out there as well.
Well, I mean, I was at Bloomington for a long time in the 80s when IU was known for basketball. Bobby Knight
Mhm.
and there was an animosity with Purdue. So it was the same. You know,
Yes,
I saw that all the time. Fun.
definitely. It's
Yep.
definitely fun. Hey, along those lines, and it's something that Sharif said and everything, because he was actually saying what you said, which is that we should respect each other. And so, as we get ready to head out the door and everything, what advice would you give to people in order to have a more respectful nation and just have more respect about differences in conversations, whether it's around Ukraine and whether it's around Sudan or a number of other hotspots, or just having respect for each other in life and everything, because I'm sure there are people that you get along with that might be of different nationalities
Yeah.
and even different religions. So what advice would you give to the world in terms of things we can do to be more respectful?
Well, I usually just say by not talking to each other and by not listening to each other, we haven't gotten any place. If we're going to maintain that kind of animosity, nothing is ever going to be resolved. So, you know, I always ask people just, you know, hold your tongue when somebody else is speaking. Don't use expletives. Don't shout somebody down. Try not to interrupt. I interrupt now and then when I hear something that's really wrong, but I shouldn't. I think people just need to hold their tongue and listen. These Many of these subjects are very passionate for people, and I understand that people have very strong views, but there comes a time when we have to put some of those passions aside and say we're not getting anywhere by shouting each other down. And in the case of Israel Palestine, you know, tens of thousands of people are dying, and it's not accomplishing anything. It is actually creating a lot more hatred, and it that doesn't bode well for the future of this planet.
Yeah, that's very true, and everything like that. Like I said, it's a global network. So it's the last thing I'll ask you, and then, like I said, I'll play the ending outro, which I should have done a few minutes ago, and all along those lines. But um, one of the things I do on most of my shows is I give people a chance to give a message of positivity, and you've done a lot of that even in this conversation. But it is a global network, and we have a lot of global issues, whether it's climate change or whether it's
Yeah.
things going on with conflicts in the world, or even famine, not just in Gaza but in Sudan and places like that. So I
Right.
just kind of like take it as my personal mission. I even do it on my online dinner party, which is my personal show that I do on Wednesday, to get my guests an opportunity to give a message of positivity, because I figure if we spread enough positivity, we might be able to make a positive change in the world. It might be optimistic on my part, but that's just kind of like my mantra and my even reason for doing some of these media things, because I kind of come from the philosophy of Charles Carlton, Walter Cronkite, and others that I think had a great deal of respect for people as they interviewed them, even though they might not have always agreed with them and everything like
Hmm.
that. So I just wanted your take on a message of positivity to share with our global network, because the network is global. I know it airs on Roku, it airs on different social medias, and it airs over and over again. So definitely people from around the world are constantly watching, including some from our allies and our quote unquote enemies like China and stuff like that. But what is your take on a message of positivity to the global community?
Well, you know, I think we're living in very dark times, and it's easy to get very jaded and very cynical fast. My message of positivity would be that it's up to us to make change. It's up to the grassroots.
Right.
We can't sit back and expect our leaders to make things better for us because they have their own interests. It's up to us as the people. And I know that it's difficult at times, but we are what we have. We've got to rely on each other. You know, I was a good friend of the late Robert Fisk, who was the Middle East journalist, Middle East correspondent for the London Independent. And he used to say, you know, sometimes you feel like you're up against a stone wall and you're chipping away at this stone wall, wondering, you know, how you can possibly make it break. And he said, but you think that if everybody is doing that, even those little, just that little bit of chipping away, eventually you get cracks in the wall and eventually the wall crumbles. So you just have to keep chipping away at what you see as injustice, because when when everyone does that, when you have a mass movement of people doing that, you have real hope for change.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Like I said, definitely appreciate you being on, Jennifer. Sorry that I wasn't here when you first arrived and everything, but like I said, technology has a mind of its own, and I was actually
Yes.
on Spectrum trying to see if it was technology or me and the bills, but it did turn out it was technology and all of those. So the fine folks at Spectrum helped me get the router and everything back up running. So I kept popping in and out, even on the phone. I was like, she's here, she's not here, she's not here. And then when I came back, you were finally in a location. So I'm glad to be able to spend this roughly hour with you and to have this conversation. And like I said, it is an invitation to come back whenever you are able in our news show, which, like I said, it airs Monday through Fridays at 10 a.m. Then World Politics, which is Tuesday through Thursday at 5, and my own personal show, The Online Dinner Party, which is just people. I think of it as like my parents used to have Bidwiz games. They both are still living, but when they were younger and everything, they would have friends and they would talk politics and sports and whatever else was on their mind. So, and then if I thought to myself, if I lived in a house as opposed to an apartment and had a significant other, what would it be like if we just invited friends over for a dinner party and just had conversation? So that's what I think of as my personal show, which is the one I do on Wednesday. And we just learn from each other. And actually, I love it when people ask each other questions on that show, because it's it kind of can be a lazy form of journalism because they can ask questions that they've got on their mind. And then, of course, I've always got questions on mine. So I love it when people engage with each other like you would at a real dinner party.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy, actually, because people talk, and usually people manage to be polite at dinner parties.
Exactly.
Not always, but usually.
Usually they do.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm here to get us on out of here, but I do appreciate this time to have this conversation with you. And like I said, it is a standing invitation, and hopefully we'll get you back on in the near future. But thanks for shedding some light on a area that I think is oftentimes misunderstood. And I did have a acquaintance, because I was involved in the Occupy movement and other movements, that was from Palestine and was a Palestinian young lady. I want to say she might be in her early 30s now and everything. But at the time we were involved in Occupy, she was probably in her 20s and everything. But she definitely shed some light on that situation to me as well. And a lot of it was similar to what you said and all along those lines. So definitely glad to have people that are able to give me insight on places that I don't know. Like my next door neighbors are from with the two countries that are fighting each other, Senegal and Eritrea and Ethiopia. So I think I think they're from Eritrea, if I remember correctly. But they are. But it's always fun learning from them as well.
That sounds fascinating. Yeah. Well, I better get my cat off to the vet. Okay. And I enjoyed being on, and it's nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well. And tell the cat that it'll be all right. The cat, the vet will not torture him or her too much and everything. So they'll get through it, just like we get through our doctor's appointments.
I love it. All right. Well, I hope you have a good rest of your day. For me, it's only 8:30, so I've got a long day ahead. And I appreciate this very much.
No problem. It was almost lunchtime here, so my stomach is telling me it's almost time to eat and everything like that. So I will definitely catch up with you later. And like I said, have a good time with the cat at the vet, and don't let the cat get tortured too much. I'm sure the cat will survive.
I hope so. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Take it easy.
Bye. We're going to get out of here. Another great conversation on World Edition, and we'll be back on later today with World Politics, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of World Edition.